How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, a topic that has been requested because recently we had an issue in Alabama where could have been like an assistant director running off with an inmate. So, of course, the questions that have been coming across my way through emails, through messages, through a live chat we had yesterday was, let's talk about female staff working with male offenders. So today we're going to have Connie Alleyne. We know who Connie is. I'll have her introduce herself shortly. And we do have a retired, now I'm going to say captain, but she did achieve a higher title. But I do know she was a captain. She worked in corrections for over 31 years, went through the custody rank. So I have a female custody and a female civilian, a nurse. And we're just going to kind of try to cover all angles. We're going to try to tell you what it's like to be a female working with male offenders. But in the process, guys, there's going to be some tips along the way as people share their stories. Because as we say, guys, I mean, there's no success without failure. So we're asking you to listen to our stories, listen to where the vulnerabilities are. And as I said, failure's feedback, and then look where we're at now. So it's great to learn from other people's mistakes so we ourselves don't make them in the future. Now, guys, the show is sponsored by three entities. We have American Military University. If you guys are looking for a degree, seek higher education, bring experience back into the classroom, check out American Military University. It's a great online school, very supportive of us on Tier Talk, but more importantly, supportive of what we do in the corrections profession. I also have Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. And guys, if you get a chance, I got that new sponsor, Shea USA. Now, mind you guys, the spelling is CEIA. Check out, they got a lot of good equipment there, guys. So Shea USA is the world's leading weapon, cell phone, and contraband detection system manufacturer for corrections. For more information, contact Joe Vasquez at 440-561-7615. He's a subject matter expert. He's passionate about our industry, and he will take good care of you. And by the way, guys, they are also very supportive of what we do. So far as of now, they have provided us with a few dollars to do videos that don't relate to their business at all. It actually relates to us and what can make it better for us in this profession. So I think that's pretty cool. They're helping us get the message across. So thank you, Shea. Shea. I appreciate that. And guys, don't forget, I have a book on the market, Inmate Manipulation Encoded. Link to that is in description. I'm still working on my next book. It should be out next year. And I'm at May 21st. So I'm moving, however slow, but I'm moving. Okay, so this is going to be a great episode because I know for a fact that once we do this episode is going to be distributed to different agencies already in need of some good training for our correctional staff. So first, let me bring on someone that should have been on yesterday's live, but she falls asleep around 6:37 Eastern time, her time, literally. And then she gets up sometime around noon the next day. I'm way off.
Way off.
You know what happened, Connie? I put you in too quick. I should have let that sit in there for a little while.
I'm glad you did.
That was my conscience. My conscience was like, you better put that in. You better push her in. Hey, by the way, guys, obviously, you know, Connie's a hard worker. We're joking. But Connie, if I may, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience? And in the intro, if you don't mind, towards the end, can you express why you feel that this is an important topic to cover today?
For sure. So, hi, everybody. My name is Connie Alleyne. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall, the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. I'm also a criminal justice professor at Monroe College. And I am a regular contributor here at Tier Talk. So I enjoy this partnership. And, you know, today we're talking about...
Hey, hold on, Connie. We're family. All of a sudden it's business.
Oh, my God.
I enjoy being part of the Tier Talk.
So listen, guys, as he's writing this book, he is picking apart. If you ever email him something, make sure it's straight. Make sure you got everything correct, because he picks apart language, body language, any kind of language. Just be sure, right? So there is nothing about me saying partnership because we partner in this space, but he knows we're family. He's coming to my house for the 4th of July, and we're celebrating his anniversary, right? So if he ever see,
well, now I feel like shit.
You should.
All right, you know what, Connie? Take the space. It's yours, my sister.
Oh my God. So we are doing a show today about being a female in corrections. I think that the issue that's recently in the news in Alabama has really sort of sparked that discussion again about women in corrections, whether they should or shouldn't be working in corrections. And really, as a female who worked in corrections for a pretty long time, and as you guys will meet Barb, she's been in there a long time. Like, our reality is that we are as effective, we can do the job. Are there ways that we can be manipulated? Perhaps, but they're no different from the ways that any male counterpart can be manipulated. So I think as we explore this, I think the different perspectives will truly help us shed some light on this whole conversation.
Yes. And by the way, guys, obviously we've shared some of Connie's stories before, but I think that these stories definitely would like to hear some of them again, because now I think the context is going to add a little bit more to the meaning behind those stories. So and definitely kind of branching from what happened, as I said, in Alabama. Now, guys, this is the first time we're going to meet somebody. Her name is Barb Arnett. As I said, she's going to introduce herself, but she's quoted in my book a few times on the book coming, and tremendous amount of experience, 31 years. She's going to talk about that briefly, and then she's going to tell us why she feels this topic is important. Now, mind you, both ladies, Connie and Barb, are very busy today, but they know that this topic is important. So they wanted to come on and get it out there, because you never know who needs it at that moment. So, Barb, I have you. And Barb, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
No, I don't mind at all. First of all, thank you. Thank you for Tier Talk. Long time coming for this career field to be recognized. And it's pretty cool. I think it's awesome. No, my name is Barb Arnett. I actually have 35 years with the department. I started in 1982. Had a little break in the middle. Took a little time off, moved down to Florida for a year, and then came back to work. Yeah, I started out as a correctional officer when I was 24 years old, and I just retired in January at 62.2 years old. No, 64. I'm sorry, I'm 64. Yeah, that's my history.
All right, well, just out of curiosity, can you kind of talk about your journey, your trajectory real quick? Like, so you started off as a custody member, you worked your way all the way up, like the different facilities, if you don't mind?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I worked 4 different facilities, all custody levels. I started out as an officer. I became a sergeant. I was a shift lieutenant. I was a correctional unit supervisor. We had an officer murdered at one of our facilities, and they created security specialist positions. I took a demotion to take that job. It was very important to me. And then I became a captain. I was captain for a little over 5 years, and then I retired as a general manager for correctional industries.
It's a hell of a career, guys. I mean, that's just going the distance on that, which is great. So, guys, again, this topic was requested, so hopefully we're able to provide you with some insight in working with males as a female staff member. So first, let me start off with Barb first, only because she started back in the 80s. I'm sure times are a little bit different now. I would like to think that we've evolved and we see the benefits of having both genders. And what I mean by that is females working with males, males working with females. I believe there is quality behind doing that. I believe that both have their separate areas of gifts that they bring back to the profession that also doesn't just aid for safety and security, but don't forget, we are moving towards rehabilitation. So having said that, there's a lot of benefits by having the inmates exposed to both genders, professionals, as I said, people that come in and do the job. So real quick, coming in the 80s, the first thing I'd like to ask, as a female officer entering the corrections in the 80s, let's just do this first to get out of the way. How did the male staff see you first, knowing that you're in a position to respond to a code in which they may need your protection?
Well, back in the 80s, when I started, our department had only been a department for about a year. Department of Social and Health Services ran our prisons back then. But when they were all rioting and a little out of control, they decided to take back control of the prisons. They created the Department of Corrections. So when I started, there was a huge recruitments going on to get people to come to work in the prisons, and not too many women. I mean, I think there are 45 people that started with me, and only 2 of us were women. And the gal I started with, she just retired too. She was a retired Marine, or she had been in the Marine Corps. Me, not so much, right? I had no experience. But I think it's important to note too that I worked at 4 different facilities, and I don't know about your states, but each facility kind of has its own personality. Yeah, you have custody levels, but they have their own personality. They have their own makeup, meaning, it's hard to explain, but where I worked when I first started was kind of one of the older facilities, had kind of a old school approach to things, people that have been around a long time, male dominated. Yeah, we were pretty isolated as women. We weren't wanted. You're not doing the same job. You're not doing strip searches. We can't trust you to, have our backs, that kind of stuff. So, and then you didn't have a group of women that you could really, cling to either. So you had to be strong inside, and back then I was young and stupid. I didn't know what I was doing. And, but luckily, I partnered up with some good folks, and I worked really, really hard to earn respect. I mean, I worked super hard. I put in 250% to everybody else's -5 to earn that respect. So I know they had my back. And then, fast forward to another facility. I went to an even older facility, one that was built in 1906, and it was a maximum security. A lot more diverse, though, as far as women and people of color. And that was different. It was better in some ways. But it wasn't until I went to my 3rd facility that was new and had a startup team that was pretty evolved. And it was kind of a half and half as far as male and female staff, custody staff. And that balance really showed me that we do have a positive effect in a correctional environment. Not everybody has to have a lot of testosterone. You need good communicators. So just all those talents and all those personalities, all that diversity is what I believe made a very safe and pleasant place to work, actually.
Now, do you think that you mentioned facilities that have evolved, and obviously when we talk about evolve or evolution, we're talking about their perspective and seeing women equal in the workforce, in the work that's being done, being just as effective. Do you think that when you first came in, or facilities that haven't evolved and still have that primitive mindset, the inmates can see that there's a divide between female officers and their male counterparts? And in some cases, do you think the inmates try to kind of get themselves into that divide by offering the females protection because they feel that the male officers are kind of just isolating them to some extent?
They do all of that. I mean, that's what they do. I mean, the games criminals play, that book's been around forever. It should be the Bible for corrections. They have nothing else to do. When you take away somebody's freedom and you put them in an institutional environment, there's a chemical change that happens in their brain. And everything becomes about them and what they can get and what they can have and who they can manipulate. It doesn't even necessarily need to be female. But, back in the early 90s, when I was working at my 2nd facility, I was part of a startup team to start some training on, it was called Dealing with Offender Manipulation. And we had seen people get walked off before. We'd heard all the stories and all the rumors of, women especially getting hooked up with the incarcerated, and falling in love and blah, 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 the story. So, so this is pretty groundbreaking to have this kind of a curriculum. And when we taught it at new employee orientation, and we would start with doing like a kind of a stress assessment with people, like, where are you at in your life, right? Are you going through divorce? Are you being foreclosed on? You having some financial issues? Blah, blah, blah. Just go down the list of big stressors going on in your life. And we were pretty straight up and blunt about it. We couldn't get away with that now. But pretty straight up and blunt about, like, maybe this isn't for you. Because we know you're the type of individual that they have nothing else to do but to stand around and watch you all day long. I can't tell you how many times. I mean, I've been married a couple times, right? I go walking down a deer, doing a tear check. Somebody stops me and says, "How come you're not wearing your wedding ring anymore?" "Oh, you did something different with your hair." I mean, they have nothing else to do but to watch us, watch our body language, watch what we do. I mean, and I'm pardon my language, but they even know when you're on your period. I mean, it was crazy. So when people come into this work environment and they're already under a lot of stress, they just become super easy targets. And it happens to the guys too. So, but predominantly, it's been my experience mostly with women. And, you know, I'd like to say in 2022 that things are better that way, but they're not. They're really not. One thing I want to do, one thing that was on my agenda to do when I was a captain was I wanted to create a curriculum or a training aside from the other training. Because we did, sorry, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Our training was similar to what Connie was saying. We had correctional officer training or uniform staff training, and then support staff training was separate. In the mid-90s, our state brought it all together so that everybody went to the same academy, Correctional Worker Corps, they called it. The only difference was, weapons quals and defensive tactics. So I wanted to take that a step further, though, and I hadn't really decided if I wanted it to be all-inclusive, but I really wanted to target the female staff that work in a correctional facility, because they tend to be the targets, and they tend to be the most vulnerable for whatever. I mean, you got some single mom working double shifts, getting mounded all the time, having financial issues, and a lot of drama going on in their life. They become the perfect target for a predator.
And when you say mandatory, you mean, can you explain mandatory? Mean that they're getting, so just, we have an audience that may be from the outside. So guys, mandatory, if you're custody staff or even medical staff, where you serve an essential role, if there's not enough coverage for the next shift, you could get forced into that shift with very little notice. And then now an 8-hour or 12-hour day could easily become a 16-hour day, and multiple times a week, by the way. But yes, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to make sure. So you can continue. I just want to make sure people knew what that was.
No, I think that's all I wanted to say is that, like I said, I think there's been improvements. I mean, my career span, this sounds really impressive. I love it. 5 decades, right? But, and things kind of tend to move because of the politics and the state job and all that kind of thing, I mean, things evolve at kind of a glacial pace, by the decade. You want to see change happen and it just doesn't. So there's been a lot of progress and a lot of good things that have happened, but, and I know the facility that I left, yeah, they were very progressive. Things are really good, but I think because of the political climate right now, the pandemic, things of that nature, they've really backslided, and they have a really tough time getting females to come work there. The female staff, custody staff anyway, are kind of at odds with the male staff. I think they have 1 female lieutenant and I think 2 female sergeants out of 45. I mean, it's really gone the other direction. I'm not really sure why. But they don't have any female leadership at the hierarchy. So not very well represented right now, but that could change.
Well, it's good that we know that, because the last thing we want to do is we don't want to go backwards. We want to go forward. So this dialogue actually serves another purpose too. In the process of giving tips, we're also reminding people of the value that females do add in a male facility. Now, Connie, she has worked in 2 facilities, one a jail, one a state prison. And now, by the way, now she does work on the medical side. So I'm assuming, let's do it this way first. Were there any concerns? I mean, being a nurse, I don't think there's you're working around mostly females, correct? Or okay, you're muted. So okay, so go ahead, Connie. I apologize.
So I was never a nurse. I keep correcting you.
I always forget.
I know. So as health services manager, we worked with males and females. So on Rikers Island, I worked in OBCC, C73, C76, C71, Rose M. Singer, and ARDC with the kids, West Facility with the infectious disease inmates. So, I mean, that gave me, and when Barb says each facility has its own personality, just imagine on one big Rikers Island, each of those facilities had its own personality. And as you go from facility to facility, you have to learn that. And, I started pretty young too. I was in my 20s when I started, and I knew nothing about nothing. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a discharge plan. I'm going to help everybody. And so when you go in, you're kind of going in gullible to begin with, because you're thinking you're going to help everybody, and that help is going to be received in the way you intend it to be received. You have to learn firsthand that even in your good nature, some of that good nature can be misunderstood or misinterpreted, just all of it, right? So having those facilities under my belt was one thing, but then coming into the Connecticut system where there are 17 different prisons and jails here, like we covered the entire state as administrators. So if you're on call, you're covering the state, but also in the absence of other HSAs, you have to go work in those other facilities. So I took ownership for the Hartford jail as administrator, and then was later transferred to the women's prison here in Connecticut. So my exposure to the population was pretty significant and all levels. So with women, because it's only one facility, it went up to maximum security. And with the males, we went from low security on up. Definitely, I think when you deal with the male population, it's kind of like you have to conduct yourself in a way that's very different. I don't know how to explain that. Maybe Barb understands what I'm saying, but it's kind of like you want to go in and just do your job, but you have to always bear in mind, how am I walking? Am I smiling? Who am I smiling at? Any of those mannerisms that are naturally you as a woman, you've got to kind of almost hold it together so that nothing is being misinterpreted. If I've given a direct order, if I'm expecting the inmate to respond in a certain way, I have to understand and take ownership for the way I'm conducting myself, my body language, my eyes. I remember someone telling me that I was flirting with them. I was like, what? Like, he's like, oh, you looked at me. Listen. and I think sometimes it's just our natural, like I remember it was oh, you looked at me. And I remember wanting to correct that. Like in the moment, I think because I was new, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't want to have like a confrontation with an inmate, which can be very intimidating, especially when you're not confident in your role or confident in your space in that facility. But I remember speaking to a male officer that was like, yeah, you need to correct him. Right. And like, I remember that the next one, like the next encounter I had, I was sure to correct it. But even then, it's like all these things that are going on in your mind, in your body, the tension that you carry because you're just so uneasy. And I think, yes, over time, it may get a little better because you just feel more confident. Also, your fellow the officers have your back, right? They're kind of looking out for you because they know you're not in there looking for a husband, right? Which that's unfortunately what we found with some of the folks that we may have interviewed from time to time, right? And have come into work and their pants are so tight that they're responding to a code. You could see their panty line. You could see the pattern on their panties. It's like all these things that I think, from an HR perspective, we don't speak about, especially when you're on the job, because that opens the door to all kind of crazy. But the reality is that if you have to go into your administrator's office and say, is my pants too tight? Should I put on a lab coat? Right? Like that is a problem. I think your pants are too tight and you should have on your lab coat, or you shouldn't wear this here. But I think to the point of there being intentional outreach to female employees who come into the system, I think that is a great curriculum, which Barb, maybe that's, your calling, right? I think that's an intentional, I think that's a great curriculum, because I think there are things that we may take for granted, especially if you've never worked in this space before. And so you don't realize that you may want to conduct yourself as you would in a traditional work environment. But when you step into corrections, it does have to change. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to start to act like a man, right? Because I think I've seen that also, some females who take on a very masculine persona in the space so that they're accepted or whatever. I don't want to make up a reason for why they do it, right? But there are some who take on a more masculine persona. But I feel like as we build our confidence in who we are and our understanding of the environment, we're better equipped to be able to operate in ourselves, right? I own who I am. I can't help it. I smile all the time. And I've tried to not smile. I've had officers say, Connie, your smile is welcoming. And I'm like, I'm not welcoming anything though, right? Like, so I'm aware of it. And I try to like reel it in when I'm around the population, because I don't want to send any mixed signals. But there is definitely a way that as a female, we have to move very differently in this space.
Yeah, I want to mention something. You mentioned a couple of things. The interview process, I think it's not always evident during the interview process. I agree with that, because you could have some people that are spot on, but then later on in their career, they could easily be influenced by an inmate, and then their behaviors could shift. I know some of the things I look for is when I do interview them, I look for, try to get an understanding of who they think they work for. If some of them are strictly saying, well, I work for the inmate, I work for the inmate, it's like, no, you work for the house. And the house governs your rules. If you go in with the mindset that you work strictly for the inmate will take advantage of that. Trust and believe. You have to remember you're governed within the rules of whatever the house allows. But I love what you said. You said something about corrected. I want to mention something, and maybe both you ladies, I'll start off with Connie this time and go back to Barb. I know when an inmate, when they try to play their game, whether it's, hey, hey, I like what you I like how you smell today, or I like how you look. There was a story a while ago with a love letter where an inmate wrote a love letter to an officer. The officer did the right thing, guys, reported it and everything. When the inmate found out, he went to the officer and he asked the officer, like, why would you do that? And the officer turned and said to him, because it's against policy and procedure. Now, for the most part, people think that's a good answer. That's great. But for the inmate's thinking, well, if it wasn't for policy and procedure, we could be together. So with that said, the better answer is more towards the internal justification. That why'd you do that? Because it's not right. Because I say it's not right. I'm not here for this. Whatever it is, something where the inmate can't put it on anybody else. He can't put on any external justification. It's internal. It's coming for you. So when you talked about corrective measures, Connie, and I think Barb will compliment after you, does the corrective measure deal with the belief and the push away when the inmate is trying to play that game? Like how adamant do you have to be that you're the one setting the tone and not the house, whatever the case may be? How important is that when you correct the inmate?
So I think it's paramount because, the other inmates see how you are conducting yourself, right? So if I don't take a firm stance that this is not appropriate, I'm not interested, this is unwanted, anything else that leaves room for them to think that there's a slight chance of something going on, they will continue to push the envelope. And even if they stop, the others may see like, oh, well, she didn't turn him down. She didn't rat him out. She didn't write him up. There's all those other things that go on that we may not be thinking about in the moment. So it's like a solid shutdown shuts down that inmate and everybody else around him or her that's looking and thinking, well, maybe I could try something too.
Yeah, and I just want to add also, outside the solid shutdown, we also talked about documentation, correct? Like if the inmate's making the game, how important it is to document, even if it's small, even if it's the statement's innocuous, how important is it still to document that interaction?
So once you document it, it means that you're letting everybody else know, right? Which the inmate may not like that, right? Like, because now you're putting other people onto the game. They're trying to run some game on you. Now you're just throwing it out there for everybody to know that they're doing this, right? And I think what it also does, it lets other people know. So just in case they were doing it to someone else and that person thought they were special, you may have interrupted the game for quite a few people that this inmate was trying to get to.
And hey, Barb, I'm sure in your career you may have had some inmates play some type of game, some flirting game, whatnot. I'm sure. So the thing is, I mean, how important is it to let that inmate know that not only does the game stop here and now, it stops forever?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is classic. This is classic stuff been going on since the end. I mean, it's just classic, right? So they're going to test you, and they're going to see how you respond. And depending on how you respond, they're going to keep testing, okay? So just like Connie said, right on, right? You got to shut her down. And I want to be appropriate here.
You can listen,
okay?
I'm not monetized. Say whatever you want to say. YouTube can't take it from me.
well, when I was younger, right? And, younger and, attractive and, the flirty stuff was just off the hook, right? They'd look you up and down, they'd test you, they'd say things to see, how you're going to respond. And, sometimes you had to respond kind of harshly, drop some F-bombs or rat them out to the tier. Hey, look at this asshole. He just called me a blah, whatever, right? Or, oh, well, Officer Arnett, you smell really good. What's that perfume you're wearing today? That's called Final Net. Right? Hairspray, whatever. But I mean, make them, to make them look stupid, and then they, shut them down and whatever. But sometimes that's dangerous because then all of a sudden you can be a target. They want to take you out because you made them look bad, right? So I learned some tough lessons when I was younger. But then as I got older, it's like, really? You can talk to your grandma that way? I mean, come on, dude. So I think you have to find your own style. You have to be you, right? But what I like to, and I really wish we had training. We don't have training on this kind of stuff anymore. You keep it real, you keep it professional. Disclaimer.
Yeah. Don't worry, I had your back anyway. I had your back.
I love you. Okay, so keep it professional and be consistent. You're firm, you're fair, you're consistent. We say that all the time. We've been saying that since the beginning of time in corrections. But it's really true. And then, I love what Connie said as far as documenting. You don't keep it a secret. If you got some inmate playing games with you, talking smack, and just being relentless, documentation and reporting that and letting everybody know shuts that down really quick, right? Shuts it down really quick. So one thing, and I think it's important to know you too. I knew me, and not saying that I felt that I was vulnerable, I could have been easily manipulated. But one of the reasons I always, especially when I was an officer for 15 years. And I moved around. I bid on positions where I was a relief, so I worked everywhere, right? Or I worked max security. Those are my two favorite jobs. Working in a living unit with 260 inmates and 2 staff, where you're running your ass off all day and they're coming in complaining to you about all their problems and all their needy stuff and blah, 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 blah all day long, was not in my wheelhouse. Okay. And I knew that. And I didn't ever want to be or put myself in a position where I could have been manipulated.
Right. And I want to mention something. You guys know so far in this first part here, the gist of it all is to make sure that the inmate knows that you don't tolerate that behavior. So it doesn't come across if you just walk away from a compliment either, or if you ignore it. It doesn't stop the inmate from doing it again. So you basically have to do what you can to kind of stop that behavior then, now, and forever. And the other good thing about documenting it, guys, is it lets the inmates know that you're still connected to the house. That's a big important thing to me, because when the inmate comes up to you, the inmate's also testing to some extent where you're going to go with this information. Because I want to see who, if you're already away from your peers or not. So it's great when you document it and then a supervisor comes around later on to address that inmate. It just shows that. And by the way, this is not something that's a weakness. It's just more of a strength to let the inmate know we're a family. So it automatically shows that not only did this female officer handle it on spot by addressing the inmate, no fair there, but she reported to the supervisor to hold the supervisor responsible. So now we have Okay, Connie, yes.
One thing I want to add to that, which I think is really valuable, is I recall doing a tour with my clinic captain one day. And I was still, I don't know, maybe a year on the job or so. So he knew me pretty well at this point. And I remember reporting that an inmate kept making comments and it made me feel uncomfortable. And so we were doing a tour through like the way the building was set up. We would go through medical, and then like the bullpen was like right next to medical. And we got into the bullpen and the inmate was in there. Now, I'd never have a conversation with my captain about this, like ever. And so we get in there and we see the inmate, and my captain says, "You keep fucking with my discharge planner." And I for me as the discharge planner, like I couldn't, like, it made me feel so good to know that he even knew that it was happening, right? Like, and he was addressing it. It wasn't even so much that I had to address it, but he addressed it. And I was so taken back because I was like, oh my goodness, he knows and he's dealing with it. This is so awesome. So the fact that you know, when we write stuff, I think sometimes we may think we're writing in vain. Nobody cares, who knows, that kind of thing, because it's like, what am I writing it for? Nobody's going to address it. Right. But to know that not only did he take note that it happened, which meant he read the logbook, right? He read the little report, but also he was addressing it in front of me. We were together. And I think that sent a different message. I didn't hear another thing from that inmate in the time I was there.
And I love it because it also connects. I mean, for Connie's story, it's great too, because it connects two departments.
Yeah.
Trust and believe, when two departments don't get along and there's that back and forth, the inmates are the only ones that win from that because they love when we're divided. I wanted to mention something else too, kind of going back to what we discussed a little bit earlier. I find that inmates offer protection more to female staff on the assumption that females, on the wrongful assumption, guys, bear with me, guys, there's nothing, just hear what I'm saying. On the wrongful assumption that a woman may be weaker in a male unit. And I'm going to say the wrongful assumption. I'm outnumbered here. But I do agree it's the wrongful assumption. But they'll offer protection more to a female officer. Don't get me wrong, they do offer it to males if they figure the male is weak. 100%. They feel the male is weak. They feel they can intimidate them. But I don't think it's so much of an offer of protection. I think it's more of intimidation. You know, I think it could be a little bit different, but nothing's 100%. But I think for the females, they may offer it more just on that wrongful assumption. If that does happen, because I know for a fact, it does, because I've had people message me telling me without realizing it's wrong that they actually have an inmate that protects them so they have no concerns. And it's like, whoa, hold on. What does that say? When an inmate offers you to protect you and you accept it, you're saying that the protection you have, the people that are sworn to protect you, your brothers and sisters, that protection is not good enough. So I believe there are some staff right now that may feel that it's okay for that inmate to offer protection. And I do want to get that out there. Hey, Connie, so let me start with you first real quick. Connie, so do you find that for maybe even those in medical, the nurses that work medical, do you feel that inmates may try to offer the female protection? And if so, what would be the proper response from staff, from the female?
So I do feel that, you know, inmates may offer them protection or offer females protection, but I think it's for different reasons, right? So I know I had a nurse who was doing like we were doing medication in a unit. And so taking meds to the unit, inmate, I mean, she had already told me that there was an issue with the inmate, but because she was the one who was taking meds, she was never unescorted though. We always had an officer who escorted her to the units with meds. But she reported that the inmate told her he had her back, right? Which of course, custody is like, so are they going to make an attempt on the med cart? Of course, that's the first thought. So having more than one officer, as well as having the officer in the unit kind of on guard or like prepared, you know, for anything to pop off. But it was also, you know, was there something about her? Like, was it a warning about the med cart, or was there something about her that, you know, warranted or called for him to make that statement? And in the moment, she said, "I don't need your protection." Right. And I think it's when you set those very clear boundaries, because she said, I got my protection with me, right? So here she has an escort officer, and he had been our escort for a really long time. So, he knew the game, and we kind of had already talked about it. But I think it's one, if you're confident in your role and you're confident in who you are and your relationship with custody, I think it's very easy to say, I don't need your protection. And I think one day I was meeting with an inmate, and I remember him saying he got my back. And I didn't know anything about, I was still fairly new. And my officer at the time was like, what has he got your back for? Like, what is that? And I was like, I don't know. He was like, ask him. And I was like, oh, okay. So I didn't know that I could ask that, right? Because it's also sometimes you need that permission. I know by virtue of your role, and that, an inmate is an inmate, and we have inherent control to an extent over this population, or authority with this population. So I never was one to kind of leverage that. I kind of just thought listen, the encounter is over. Great. Let him go back to his unit. Let this be done. But when he said, ask him, that was a different level of empowerment that he gave me in the moment. And I was like, hey, what do you got my back against? Right? Why did you say that? But I don't know that I would have been confident enough until I knew that it was okay to not only ask him the question, but if that interaction had went south, the officer was already ready. He knew that I was about to go have this confrontation almost. And I think there's sort of that sometimes we let things go just because we're unsure or we're fearful of what the response is going to be, right? It might be something verbal, it might be something physical, but am I ready for either of the two? And so he was like, nah, I'm just saying, right? So now he's backpedaling because I've now pulled this officer into the dialogue too, right? But you got my back. What does that mean? And I think, the more we don't take those little comments for granted, right? I don't think we should be dismissing them because they make us uncomfortable, which sometimes that's what happens. We may dismiss it or we'll brush it off. And so I don't know. I think that absolutely in the moment, just hey, so what is that supposed to mean? What do I need you to have my back for? I think that's appropriate.
I think there was something that you said also that maybe Barb could also feed up on is you mentioned the importance of having that relationship with staff. So I'm assuming definitely if the inmate notices that the relationship is weak with your peers or with the other departments, whatever, especially if it's a civilian who has a disconnect with custody being that failsafe, it opens up the window for that opportunity. And it's great to know that when you said that, what it also does, it reinforces in the inmate's perspective that relationship, the fact that custody was right next to you. And, of course the inmate's going to backpedal because I got the officer here. So now you go right back and you reinforce the support of the officer and say, hey, what does that mean? I'm not here to play games with you. What does that statement mean? And now you can tell it to the officer because at this point here, I don't need protection from you. But I think what was great about that, and for the people that are watching this, that relationship, one, why it's so important, but two, let it be known. Let any chance you have an opportunity to expose your connection to a support staff or to custody, whatever it is, the proper resources, let the inmates know that. Inmate comes up and say, hey, can I tell you something in confidence? Sure, let me just get my sergeant and my lieutenant here real quick, and we'll start from there. But anytime you have a chance to advertise that, it's great because when inmates do certain things, even the offer to protect is really an offer to isolate, if you think about it. Like if I'm telling you, hey, I can protect you, when you say yes, what are you saying? That I don't rely on my peers. I don't trust them. Now imagine, guys, just imagine being that civilian who's got that role ambiguity, as Connie says, and doesn't know where they place with custody. And all of a sudden, they're nervous. They don't know if custody's got their back because for some reason, we never emphasized it to them. And here's this inmate coming out of nowhere. He sees that, and he goes to her, and he says what? Hey, I got your back. And then she doesn't know if custody has her back. I mean, we can assume it, but last time around, people were treating her like crap. So she doesn't safely assume it. And next thing you know, because she feels weak and vulnerable, she could say yes out of desperation. I'm not saying it's the right thing for her to do, but we should create situations that are ideal for someone to do the right thing. So having said that, did we really motivate that right decision? No. And that's why she went the other way. Again, not minimizing her role, but just saying, did we do anything to force her into the right direction? But Barb, I do believe, I like what Connie said, I believe that the officers to protect do come a lot for female officers or female staff. And I do believe emphasizing that relationship you have with your peers and the support team is really just a great way to balance that, letting the inmate know that you're not alone and therefore I don't need your protection, correct?
Well, absolutely. And I think the first thing we need to recognize is that, and we learned this after the homicide at the reformatory when the officer was murdered, is that, you can have all the, the radios and cameras and OC and all this specialized stuff and whatever, but truly the only thing that's going to keep you safe in a correctional environment is each other. We got to look out for each other. So now backtrack back into the 80s, listening to Connie talk, I was like, oh yeah, I remember. Oh yeah, I remember when that. So okay, I'm old, so it took me a little while to remember. But so I was the first female assigned to a reception center unit in the state. So the reception center is where everybody gets processed into DOC here, and it's maximum security. And I was the first female assigned down there, and I was not wanted. That was manland. They didn't want me down there. I didn't know any better. I thought it was like super cool. And so for the first month I was working down there, it's 3 tiers high, it's maximum security, and I was up on the upper deck by myself. I didn't even know how to run a lockbox. You know who showed me how to run the lockbox? An inmate. Okay? So yeah, you want to talk about isolation. I don't recall if any inmate ever said, hey, we got your back, but they saw the dynamic. Okay? They saw I was on my own. And I think I am just lucky that nothing bad ever really happened to me. I was very, very lucky. But I'll tell you what, that was a test, right? They did not want me there. And that's when I talked about, putting in 250% to everybody else's -5 to earn some respect. That was what I was talking about. That really defined my career. I was probably 28 then, and was never really somebody who was vulgar or, thought I had to be butchy or anything like that. But boy, I'll tell you what, I learned how to yell down the tier, lock up and yard in and mainline and all that stuff with a lot of bass in my voice. I mean, it was totally out of my character, but I had to do it, and there was nobody there to teach me. But it was like school of hard knocks. I am grateful for my career. I'm grateful for everything that I learned. I'm grateful for all those challenges and all those obstacles because they made me who I am today, and I like who I am today, right? But I would not wish any of that shit on any woman today. And it's not necessary. It's not necessary, right? We're all in this together. We keep each other safe. That nice balance, having a nice diverse workforce in all positions, whether you're custody, non-custody, support, whatever. That's how you have a well-run facility. That's how you have a safe facility. You're sending the right message to the incarcerated because someday they're going to get out. Okay? The majority of them are all going to get out. What are you teaching them? Right?
Yeah, I like what you said about yelling on the tier because believe it or not, what's good about that is that technically to some extent that's within our prescribed role, whether you're male or female. I mean, there are certain things that, certain things that you have to do to get that authority across. You know what I mean? And believe it or not, it's certain things that the inmates are also going to expect. So having said that, I mean, if you have a very tentative voice, people will tell you, and I do agree with this, guys, tentative voices don't work in corrections or timid. It doesn't, because the problem is you do have to speak loud because, again, you have 260 inmates there, like Barb said. And okay, Barb.
Yeah. Well, especially in that was a closed custody environment, so everybody, barred tiers. But you get into like a unit. When I was a shift lieutenant, I was reviewing a video we had a large scale incident in a day room. It was pretty bad, pretty violent, and none of the inmates were listening to orders and things like that. And the staff were just kind of walking around right? And so I kind of freaked people out when we were in muster, and I showed them how to sell in a tier. It was a very high octave, and I looked like a crazy woman pointing my finger. And I said, I'll tell you what, you go walking in the day room like that, right? I said, right? I said, they're going to be running from you. Okay. I mean, you got to take charge. You just can't walk around, hello, go yard in now. Yeah. No, that doesn't work.
And there's got it. And also for officers that think you have to do that every moment, that doesn't work either, because,
No.
you can be firm in your voice, but if you're yelling all the time, it loses out. Inmates start getting like, what the hell? He's yelling all the time. So there's
if their energy is here,
yeah,
yours just needs to be here. But if they're down here, you stay down there. Yeah, absolutely.
And again, it's speaking that firm, fair, and consistent. And when Barb mentioned that before, and Russ had touched on this before, believe it or not, firm, fair, and consistent is really about how we see ourselves, and obviously how that reflects on the inmate population. But we ourselves have to be consistent, firm, and fair within ourselves, and then obviously the outcome would reflect the inmate. Now, I do have one more area. Now, guys, I know there's a lot of areas you can discuss, but I saved this for the last because, to me, I think that this is the most important. I do have some background noise. Is that on you, Connie, right now? Like some background noise?
You sound a little muffled.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. So I saved one more piece that I feel is probably the most important piece to discuss, because I know it does happen a lot, and I want the public to know that our female officers, even males in some cases, deal a lot with exposures. Now, whether the inmate is just exposing himself, exhibition, or playing with themselves, whatever it is. First off, that can have a serious effect on anybody who sees that. I'm gonna be honest with you, not just females, but also males. I don't want to minimize that, because males do get exposed as well. But I want to talk about this a little bit, because I know for a fact that there are a lot of females that have been exposed that feel for some reason it's their fault, believe it or not. I've had that happen. And then the sad thing is the officers sometimes may start to believe it's their fault too. And it's like, guys, you're not, like, don't get me wrong, we're supposed to correct that behavior. But that's like saying that the victim's at fault for a crime. I mean, we can work with this person. Maybe there's something there, but that person's never at fault, ever. Because to me, that is one of the worst things that can happen in our prison, is that constant exposure when the inmates just think it's fun. And I'll be honest with you, right now, each exposure, before we go into with Connie and Barb, same thing, document and charge. Do not let that slide. When you're going into a unit now, you're announcing female on unit. That inmate knows you're on that unit. I don't care if you walk by and you catch them doing something and they're looking right at you, charge them. Don't allow that to happen, because if you don't, the problem is word's going to start to spread, and then the whole unit starts to do it. And it's true, it's sad, but it's true. But so I'll go with Connie first on this. Obviously exposures. I mean, being a victim of that. I don't know if have you ever went through an exposure at all, Connie, out of curiosity?
Unfortunately, I went through quite a few exposures. So at Rikers, in the sentence facility, they wear green jumpers because those are the state greens. They're officially sentenced to 1 year or less. And of course, the Velcro never works very well, right? After years of pulling them apart. And I've had a number of inmates who want to come in and meet with me. And this particular day, their boxers aren't working, or they're all dirty, or whatever the thing is. Having an inmate sit in front of you, hands in pockets with this jumper, it's not a good feeling. And, having to respond to that, so one, I initially feel disrespected. And then I'm a bit pissed off, right? Because it's a waste of my time. But also, like, what would make you think that you should come in here and do this? Of all the places you got stuff to do, like, don't come in here and do this, right? Like, and there is that, is there something about me that says that this would be okay, right? Like, am I sending some sort of signal that says, like, I'm open to you doing this crap in my office, right? Like, so there is that you go through, not so much that you're blaming yourself, but I'm always reflecting on, is there something that I might have done or said? Is there some body language, something that I'm giving off to make this okay. Now, when I
Connie,
was,
can I comment on something real quick? Because you're right.
yeah.
I want to get something, a thought that just came to my mind while we're thinking of this too, actually, is that when an inmate does that, I do want staff to realize it's not their fault as long as they're properly reacting to it, documenting, charging, because it's going to happen, sad to say. It's going to keep on happening. I mean, you have inmates that are just predators, and this is what they do every chance they get. Now you have females stripping transgender inmates based on search preferences. So, I mean, it's a different world. But I want people to know, as long as you're doing the proper reaction, if you're documenting, you're charging the inmate, and you're doing everything you can, I mean, these are just inmates that they do it. So I just want you to know it's not your fault as long as you're committed to the proper action and you're not letting it slide.
And it's not okay to rationalize it that the inmate is impulsive, right? Because, you know, I've had that experience with some of like my social work staff, the mental health providers who are thinking of the impulsivity, like the mental health aspect of the action, right? Like, and then there's that justification, right? Well, we know they're doing this because they've had a lifetime of blah, 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 blah. Like, it doesn't even matter. It's not okay, right? And I think that's where, whether you come up with a sort of clinical justification or you're just rationalizing, perhaps there's something I did, like there is no justification that makes that okay. So just to reinforce what you were saying, that we can't come up with sort of that rationalization that makes it okay, that prevents us from taking the appropriate action to sort of stop the behavior.
Yeah, can I ask something like, so what would be some specifics? I know exactly what you're saying, guys, because by the way, I was a supervisor. I've had females that have worked under me who were exposed. And to be honest with you, they always did the right thing because one is they trusted in me to do the right thing. Because again, they still have to report it to me. So as a supervisor, I also have to step up and do the right thing. I don't care how much paperwork it is. I mean, I used to hate the supervisors that would be like, it's a male jail. What do you expect? Wait a second. She went on that unit. She announced she's on the wing. I don't give a shit. The inmates are going to have to know at this point that there's a female on the wing. You know, have some level of respect. And when she's going down there, you know, and the inmate's doing it right in front of her, if you don't commit to an action, if we don't support that, if we don't support what she's doing to make sure it doesn't stop again, she's going to walk into a unit the next time, and then there's going to be 2 inmates. Then there's going to be 4. Exponentially, it's going to grow, and then we haven't done nothing to stop it. So I think that the officer's initial attempt is very important. Don't get me wrong, but the support and the follow through, even if we have to be inconvenient with that inmate. Hey, you want to do this on her unit? Not a problem. You're going to lock. You could spend some time in there right now, and then maybe you'll think about it next time. And, you know, even if it's, as I said, inconvenience, charge, whatever it is, but if they're not supported by that supervisor, every effort that officer makes on that front line to do the right thing is in vain. Correct, Connie? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because she can't stand alone. And I think that's the thing, right? Like, here it is, we are trying to, you know, address the issues, and it is even, you know, having that reinforcement that you're supported, I think really matters, because it doesn't become just a your problem, right? It's our issue, which makes it much easier for us to sort of nip the behavior in the bud.
I like that. That's another shirt we're not going to make. That's every time Connie will come up with something, and then we talk about getting a shirt, but I just given up hope. But it's not a your problem, it's an our problem, man. If that could not be the creed for Department of Corrections across the country, you know, for that, you know, that's a phrase that unites all departments. I really do. Administration down to the front line. It's not just your problem, it's our problem.
Right.
Hey, Barb, what's your thoughts? And by the way, you're muted. I caught you ahead of time just in case. But what's your thoughts on, even if let's say we do that class that you were talking about, right? And you get the staff to do the right thing, report what needs to be reported, but they're not supported by their supervisors. I mean, what's the end result?
Well, every supervisor has a supervisor. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. And that's also a shirt worthy. Every supervisor has a supervisor. So if we could just explain to the audience, what do you mean by that?
Well, you have a chain of command. So, you know, there's no secrets. There should be no secrets in DOC. Okay?
I wish that was 100% true. But you're
that
right.
Should be on
100%.
a t-shirt.
That's another, guys.
There
T-shirts
aren't
like
any,
crazy.
okay? I mean, that's one of the things I used to tell people all the time. Less history, more mystery, okay? Because if you go on the tier and you're bored and you're sitting there talking with your partner about what you did the night before with whoever, right? Or who won the game or this, that, and the other, the inmates have great hearing. They can read upside down. There are no secrets. That's why I would always encourage women too. Don't date who you work with, okay? Because there are no secrets in DOC.
Hey,
So,
guys, I want to ask you a question.
I love it, Barb. I love
Yeah,
it.
it's T-shirt worthy right now. Hey, I want to ask the question though. So, well, first of all, I want people to know that when we have inmates that are repeating offenders when it comes to these exposures, I do want you to know when they get charged like that, those charges should be forwarded also to a mental health evaluation, because if they keep on committing to these behaviors,
absolutely.
behind the wall or not, we can get them committed. So for all these
So
different,
here's another T-shirt. Weenie waggers. That's what we call them, right? And I'll tell you what, I've seen more penises in my lifetime that I ever wish to ever see, and you have to address it. And you're exactly right. It'll become like an epidemic on a unit if you don't. And
A penis epidemic.
and there's a penis epidemic, and you have to along the lines of where you were going with that is like the last facility I worked at had a very high sex offender population. So if you don't report it, you have somebody who's being deviant. They're going against their case manager's plan. They're doing things they're not supposed to be doing. And if you don't report it, they don't know, right? And here again, most of these guys are going to get out. You want them weenie wagging out there on the playground? They're supposed to be working a program, right? So regardless of what their intention is, it has to be addressed. Has to be addressed.
and there are, and be honest, you guys, there are some inmates that they do it impulsively, but there are some inmates that they just do it for the fun of it. And they think it's all fun and games, and the next thing you know, right when they go to leave, they get hit with civil commitment. Every time if inmate is constantly getting charged with those type of offenses, each time they should be brought to mental health for evaluation. Also, I will add another note: if you have an inmate that is constantly doing that, watch who you house them with as well. Just on a side note, if you have an inmate that has that type of behavior, they shouldn't be housed with any inmate that's vulnerable, because you could have an inmate that is a sexual predator, and if you house them with an inmate that falls into that vulnerable category, you're putting an aggressor with a vulnerable, and next thing you know, the inmate could be raped. So guys, I think we covered a lot. I mean, there's still always a lot to go, but it's a great starting dialogue. I was hoping we can get some closing starts. I'll start off with Barb. Barb, you have anything you'd like to say in closing? And you're muted, by the way. So got it.
Yeah, not my first day on a Zoom, right? So no, thank you. No, thank you. It was really nice meeting Connie. And I'm just honored and flattered that I was asked to participate. And I think this is Corrections Pride Month. I don't know if that's countrywide, but I know it is in this state.
Mhm.
And I've always said that we are the kind of the quiet law enforcement heroes behind the scenes. People have no idea. It's an environment you can't explain. It can only be experienced. And I think these kinds of conversations, that's why I thank you, Anthony, for your work. I think it's just super, super important. Prisons aren't going away, but they're going to continue evolving. They're going to evolve according to the political climate in every state. And you have to be able to adapt to change, because we don't have any control over that. But we have to look out for each other. If there isn't any stronger message I could send out to everybody, it's like, you don't have to like everybody, but you got to look out for each other.
I think that's powerful. I think, again, another T-shirt worthy moment. And I do want to add something. So before we go to Connie and her closing remarks, I want to say that we also tend to speak at a lot of conferences. I have California, me and Connie got Atlantic City, Wisconsin. I mean, we get offered a lot. Hopefully we can attend most. I'm still on the job. After 5 years, I'm open to a lot more. But if you can come up with a curriculum for that training, I'll put it in the right hands and you'll be at a conference the next day. So I want you to know that's how it works for us here. And Connie knows.
I love it.
We get the phone calls immediately, and they'll ask, like, who do you want to bring? Who do you got? Because they trust everybody that's on the panel, because we know not only do we get the best of the best, not only do we even bring back old school, which is still needed right now because we're losing a lot of old school, we bring back passion and purpose-driven people. So if you come up with something like that, a curriculum, I'm not lying to you. I mean, we could do something this year and then just They'll handle your travel. They'll handle your stay, and then you could discuss whatever compensation with them. But that's between. So if you want to do it, that's what we do. So I'm just going to put it
I'll be
out
in touch.
Yeah, I'm going to put it out there and probably message you every day. All right.
And just so you know, Barb, I'm on the board of MASCA, and one of the things we've talked about was creating a space for women in law enforcement, women in corrections, women, female probation officers, parole officers, just to have a space to talk about and figure out what are some of the best practices as some of the newer females come into the different roles and operate. So if that's something, I mean, we would eat you up. We would love you to come in. So, just know that there is definitely many platforms for that curriculum to be on, and we would definitely make sure that it got there. So
all you have to do is create it. We'll take care of the rest. Connie, anything you'd like to say in closing, Connie?
I would like to say this was a great dialogue. I know we talked about, being a female in corrections before, but I think, knowing that it didn't just start, right? Like, because I think, so Barb's career started in 82. That's what you said, Barb. So since 82, she's coming in young, me coming in 2000. It's like that ripe age for, you're coming in your 20s, you don't know much, you really are open to anything possibly happening to you. And like we learned how to navigate this rough water, right? There was no one necessarily trying to teach us. It's not like there was women that says, come, let's take you under your wing and let me help you get through this, right? Because I walked that walk. So I think for this show, like I appreciate being able to serve in that way, to say, like, for other women who are coming in, these things that you're experiencing have been experienced for decades prior to you coming in. And there are women who are willing to help you and talk to you about your experience and help you navigate those waters. And so for anyone who just wants to be supported, feel free to reach out. And I think for the men around us who show up and let us know that we're protected and we're not on our own, and, you guys got our back, like we need that. Right. So, it's not even so much civilian versus custody. It is all of us. We're here together. And if we truly have one mission, I think it really matters that we show up when we're needed the most.
Yeah. And guys, there was a lot of tidbit of information here. I mean, I think the biggest parts of it all was that relationship, letting the inmates know where your resources are. I also want to say something too, going back to the exposures and stuff like that. It was very important for me to say that it's not your fault. Again, if you're committed to the right actions, but if the things still continue to occur, ask yourself this question: can I do anything more? To me, that's a motivated question. It's not a question that's internalized. It's more of, let me see if there's more I can do. There always could be more to do, and that will help create the momentum to keep on trying. But the thing about this is letting the inmate know that's a behavior that you do not tolerate. I think part of the generalized discussion here was the inmate has to know it's you that does not tolerate that behavior. That's why even when we said the supervisor came on the scene after you addressed the inmate already. The supervisor now is not coming to address the issue. He's coming to support you. That's a big difference. I want people to know that. You're not running to the supervisor to do the job for you. You've already done it. The supervisor now is reestablishing that connection to let that inmate know you're not alone. So now the supervisor takes their role of support. So if that makes sense. I don't want people thinking that we're telling people to go run to the supervisor and let them do the job. I never said that. I said that you address it first and you make it adamant that this is what I think and this is how I feel about it. And then now let me show this inmate that conversation didn't just end with us. Supervisor, and then the supervisor comes in and shows that connection, shows that zero tolerance. So this way, when we deal with that inmate or whoever's committing to that repetitive behavior, whatever that bad habit may be, we address it as a house, not as an individual. Again, going back to Connie's statement, your problem is our problem. And that kind of emphasizes the support and the relationship we have as a family. So definitely a great job, guys. I agree. And as always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.